is Vision Sunday Part 2, as Beth said at the start of the service. And last year, in the midst of the pandemic, we kind of launched 3 new initiatives, which are quite bold as a church. One was the Play Cafe. You saw the film of the Play Cafe at the start of the service. The second was a new church plant into St. Richard's in Hollingdean. And in a minute, we're going to hear from... we're going to do it in the other order. Yeah, we're going to hear from Flo about the food bank at St. Richard's. But the third initiative was a youth ministry, a new youth club, because we saw that there was a real lack of provision for young people in this part of the city. Actually, in the Argus, there were a number of reports of young people being mugged in like Blakers Park and locally, and we thought, well, what can we do to respond as a church? So in a step of faith, we launched a youth cafe, and watch this little film to see what's happened.
So, on Wednesday the 12th of September 2021, we took a step of faith and opened up our church building to be a place for the young people from the local schools to hang out after school. I remember that very first Wednesday, standing here at 3 o'clock, being absolutely terrified that no kids were going to turn up. But fortunately, 40 kids did turn up and we filled the building. Within the next 2 weeks, that number doubled. Just like that, in the space of a few hours, we had begun a new journey to turn this building into a sanctuary, and God was on the move.
6 weeks later, from the foundations that we built in the Youth Cafe, we launched our St. Matthias Youth Club. The vision was simple. It was to continue to build these relationships and to unpack important and relevant topics in these young people's lives. And it was always for them to talk and for us to listen. And through doing this, we have had the enormous privilege of being welcomed into their lives. And they've started to open up to us about situations at home and at school. And we, in turn, have started to be able to speak God's truth into their lives.
Something that really illustrates the importance of the work that's happening here is a conversation I had with a young person a few weeks ago who was sharing some of their life with me and said that oftentimes they find it hard to trust, but at club they felt safe and like they could trust people. And that's really what we're trying to achieve.
Something else that we have launched this term is our Kids Club. It happens every Thursday, and we invite the year 3 to 6s from our church to simply have fun, to learn a little bit more about Jesus and build the relationships between them. And we are already noticing a difference. They are a much closer group, both on a Thursday and on a Sunday.
Now that we've set up the foundations of the youth and kids work here at St. Matthias, we're just excited to see what doors God's going to open up next. In the next year, I would love to see 2 specific things happen. First, I would love to see our youth team grow in even greater strength, because the larger our team, the larger our capacity to care for the young people of the city is. And second, we would love to have the opportunity to enter into the schools of our local area, and by doing that, be able to support the kids where they are at. Ultimately, our vision is to simply follow God as he takes us on a journey to grow in love and support for the young people of our city. And we'd love you to join the adventure.
Amazing. Should we give it up for Johnny and the youth team, Lucy and Millie? So good. Kind of poke my head in here on a Wednesday and it's absolute chaos everywhere, but it's good chaos. It's really fun. Just over a year ago, we launched the Hollingdean Food Bank up at St. Richard's. And I'm really excited that today Flo is with us, who heads up the food bank. So can we give it up for Flo? If you've not met Flo, Flo came to faith on Alpha here a couple of years ago. Come up, Flo. And then we kind of sent Flo and the team out in February last year. And we saw a little film last week about St. Richard's and all that's emerged there. And with the food bank, the fact that in the year 800 people have been served through the food bank and 5 tons of food have been given. I mean, it's amazing. But what I particularly wanted to hear from you, Flo, was a couple of stories of people that have been impacted by this.
Thanks, Tom. So what I wanted to share this morning is that when I went up to start the food bank, I had some ideas in my head about who might come through the door and who it might help. And what's been a real revelation is how who God sends through the door is not at all what I thought. So one story that I wanted to share is of someone who was a most unlikely candidate in my mind of who would be helped by the food bank, and has been helped by the food bank in ways also that I didn't foresee, that I couldn't possibly have imagined. So there's a young woman, I'll call her Jay, who arrived in this country just over a year ago from Bangladesh. And she arrived during the midst of the pandemic. We were locked down. She had never been outside of Bangladesh before, spoke some English. So for the first 4 months of her life, of her time in Britain, she was indoors and couldn't go out. I suppose could have gone for a walk, but ended up being within those 4 walls. And I really felt, gosh, for someone to come from another country, they've arrived in this pandemic, they're not meeting people, feeling isolated, stuck in indoors. Where could I invite this young woman to go? And there was the food bank, and the food bank had just started its food bank cafe. And because it's just down the road from her, I said, would you like to come to the food bank for a visit? So she came to the food bank and ended up starting to help out and to volunteer. And in that way started to meet people, meet members of the Hollingdean community who were coming in for food, but also to meet members of our community here who were volunteering and helping. And straight away there was this, it became apparent that in St. Richard's and in the food bank there was this international community. I hadn't realised how Hollingdean is actually home to quite a lot of refugees and asylum seekers, and they started to come. And so I remember one day there were maybe 6-7 women gathered around, and between us I think we spoke 6 or 7 different languages, and it was really like, wow, this is not something that I expected, but God is doing something here, gathering these disparate people, talking to each other and meeting each other, who are lonely and isolated but coming together. So Jay continued to come and help out at the food bank, and it really was giving her a purpose and a way of becoming part of the community that otherwise, I struggle to see how otherwise it could have happened. Then she's married to an older man who had a previous family. He's a widower. He had a family, so she lives with his grown-up children as well. And the family fell on hard times, had a situation. And she was able then, through knowing the food bank, through knowing the volunteers, knowing me being there, the food bank was able to support her with food and support the family with food. We also have an advisor who comes into the Hollingdean Food Bank from Money Advice Plus, and she was able to speak to him and access help in that way. So again, it was just this. I could just see sort of, well, this is God at work. I could not have foreseen how this young woman could be helped and how it would have happened if it wasn't for the food bank being there. And she continues to help others and to really be part of that whole volunteer team. And one of the other things that I think is really important is that she's Muslim, but she has met Christians, and her whole attitude has changed. I remember when I first was in conversation with her, she mentioned that there was a situation with one of the boys in the family, and she attributed it to the culture that he lives in, meaning British culture. And I was sort of taken aback and sort of tried to explain that it wasn't really British culture. It was, people fall on hard times, things happen in people's lives wherever they're from, whoever they are. But it wasn't necessarily that it was British culture, that, we're okay. And I've seen a real transformation in how she perceives us. And that's another thing that's happened at the food bank. The food bank, we think of it as being about food. And of course it is about food. And when people get food, they're grateful, they're happy, and they need the food, and everyone needs to eat, yes. But the thing about the food bank that I think is more powerful is how it's helping relationship and understanding, and people who otherwise would not have crossed paths, meeting each other and coming to see that we are one community and how we can help each other. And that for me has been sort of almost from my point of view, an unintended consequence. But to me, that is the revelation of God's love and Jesus' power, is that that's what's happening. And therefore it's about relationship, the relationships that we have, and how people's lives are being transformed through their relationships with us and with the food bank. So I know that now Jay has gone on, she's got work through people within this community, and that's really helping her, because her husband has recently lost his job, but she's stepping in to become this person whose life is transformed. She's helping her family, she's helping her community, part of that. So it's just one of those stories where I stand back, I think, oh, that's not what I thought the food bank was going to be, but actually that's amazing, and God is doing incredible work. And lots of elements of her story are reflected in lots of the other people who come, families that are broken, bereavement, mental health, isolation, all those things. So the food bank, yes, it's about food. We need the food, need to give out the food, but it's just to say that I think what God's doing there is so much more than just the food. It really is about relationship.
Amazing. Let's give it up for Flo and the team. Just so many individuals and families are being massively transformed by that work. Bless you. When I was thinking about this morning, I was just overwhelmed with thanksgiving to each and every one of you. So many people who have served and given and prayed during what has been a really challenging time. It would have been easy during the pandemic for us to kind of turn in on ourselves as a church, but seeing the youth ministry, seeing the food bank and all that's going on at St. Richard's, seeing the Play Cafe speaks to me of people that have are just kind of full of faith and vision in what God can do. And it's not only those things, it's the kids' work, it's the worship and production, those who come early on a Sunday to serve us great coffee, it's the groups, it's Adventure, it's Alpha. So many people serving the church, a lot of the time behind the scenes in all sorts of incredible ways. And on Vision Sunday, we invite everybody to do three things: to serve, to pray, and to give. Each week we pray 7:30 to 8 on Zoom. You are really welcome. The details are on our website, because the pulse of the church is prayer. And I'd love to invite you to join our prayer gathering. And then to serve, if you would like to join one of the teams, we've got a little Join the Adventure card at the back. And we just want to help you find the thing that you're passionate about, to serve at your level. And so fill in one of those cards and we'll take your details and be in touch just to kind of help you connect with a team that really works for you. And then thirdly, to give. And this morning, I'd love to invite you to invest financially in the vision we have as a church. And we do this process twice a year. And Sam, our treasurer, has kind of taken the plans and costed out the vision. And he's set us a target for Vision Sunday to see if we can raise £10,000 in one-off donations. And then also, many of you give by monthly standing order. 70 people in the church do that. And that is really kind of the the funding that means that everything happens. Some people think as a Church of England church, oh, do you get money from the Church of England or the government? Well, it's actually the opposite. We pay as a church to the Church of England. So, and in a way, the positive thing about that is that you guys are in the driving seat with a vision. If this is the thing that you sense, I'm excited for where we're going as a church, and then the giving enables that to happen. And so, as well as the £10,000, we've set the target to see if we can increase our monthly giving by £1,000 a month. And for some of us who give by monthly giving, that might look like, okay, well, can I nudge my giving up by £10 or £15 a month? Not everyone will be in a position to do that. And there might be other people who've joined the church and think, yeah, I want to really kind of invest in this mission as a church and give in this way. We're not a church that hands out the basket on a Sunday, but this is the way that people kind of financially support the vision of the church. And if you're visiting the church, please think about whatever else it is you're supporting, or the church that you're part of, and supporting your church. And later in the service, we're going to have an opportunity to give and to have a moment of offering in that way. But I'd love to read from 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and I'm going to read it from the Message version. You might not have heard this version of this passage, but here it goes. I think the words are going to be on the screen. 2 Corinthians 9, verse 10. God can pour on the blessings in astonishing ways, so that you're ready for anything and everything, more than just ready to do what needs to be done. As one psalmist puts it, he throws caution to the wind, giving to the needy in reckless abandon. His right living, right giving ways never run out, never wear out. This most generous God, who gives seed to the farmer that becomes bread for your meals, is more than extravagant with you. He gives you something you can then give away, which grows into full-formed lives, robust in God, wealthy in every way, so that you can be generous in every way, producing with us great praise to God. Carrying out this social relief work involves far more than helping meet the bare needs of poor Christians. It also produces abundant and bountiful thanksgiving to God. This relief offering is a prod to live your lives at the very best, showing your gratitude to God by being openly obedient to the plain meaning of the message of Christ. You show your gratitude through your generous offerings to your needy brothers and sisters, and really towards everyone. Meanwhile, moved by the extravagance of God in your lives, they'll respond by praying for you in passionate intercession for whatever you need, thanking God for this gift, his gift. No language can praise it enough. And when I was praying about this morning, I was praying, oh Lord God, would you just give me a little message about generosity? Maybe some stories that are going to really move people. And I felt the Lord say, Tom, I simply want you to remind people just how much I love them. And I want you to remind them that I am their generous Father. And I'm the one who loves to give them good gifts. And if only they knew how I long to give them gift after gift after gift in their lives. So that messed with my head a little bit, because I was like, oh Lord, I wanted a message to encourage generosity in them, and you're telling me, oh no, I want them to know how generous I am to them. I felt God say, just don't worry so much about your life, about whether you're going to make ends meet, or about your job, or about your health, or about decisions, because behind each worry is a little lie that you tell yourself. which says, my life is under threat. And I'm going to have to work and strive with everything that I've got, because if I make some bad moves, then it could all crumble. But the truth is that your life is not under threat. And I believe God would say to you, I am at your side today, and I'm your generous Father, and I will give you everything that you need. One of the things our children love to do in the summer is to have a water fight in the garden. And you know how it goes. The hose comes out, the big water guns, the buckets, and the garden goes from being a really relaxing place in which I'm able to kind of lounge back, sunbathing in the sun, having a drink, to being all of a sudden an incredibly stressful place where at any moment I could be absolutely drenched in water, where I've got to be on my guard and on the lookout. And it was this image that kind of came to mind as I was praying for this morning. A sense that there are people who are kind of living their lives on edge, unable to relax, unable to enjoy your life, thinking that at any moment something bad is about to happen. But I believe that God wants you to relax this morning, to enjoy the many good gifts that he's given you, and to trust that he will be protecting you and supplying all of your needs. This was the mindset that Jesus had. Jesus really believed that God is incredibly generous. And Jesus said things like, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those he loves? And throughout the Bible, we get these little glimpses of the sheer generosity of God. This destitute widow who has one small glass of oil remaining. And then God multiplies it so that she ends up with vast vats of oil. Jesus, wine runs out at a wedding, and Jesus turns 150 gallons of water into wine. I mean, it is completely over the top generosity. On the day of Pentecost, God pours out his Spirit, and it was a complete deluge. People thought that they were drunk. And in today's reading, the paraphrase from the Message, Paul writes about the extravagance of God who pours out his blessing in astonishing ways. And when you take on this kind of mindset, then you notice that three things increase in your life. The first is gratitude. You start to focus not on the things that you don't have, the things that you lack, but instead all the things that God has given you, the many, many blessings in your life. And Paul writes about how God's generosity produces in us abundant and bountiful thanksgiving. And we all know that thanksgiving is actually very powerful in our lives. Many studies have shown the link between gratitude and happiness. And so gratitude can make us feel emotionally positive, relish good experiences, be better able to deal with adversity, and better able to build strong relationships. And when we're constantly bombarded by messages which tell us what we don't have and the things that threaten us, when we thank God, what we're doing is telling our brains that we have a generous Father who is constantly giving us good gifts. The second thing that grows in us when we begin to believe that we have this generous Father is prayer. Our prayers get bigger and bigger and bigger. When Jesus reminded the people that they have a Father who loves to give them good gifts, it was in the context of encouraging them to make their prayers bigger and bigger. It's like, don't just ask me for small things. Go big on your prayers. And Paul writes about this link between God's generosity and intercession, praying to God for things. He says, meanwhile, moved by the extravagance of God in your lives, people will respond by praying for you in passionate intercession for whatever you need. It's like as people experience for themselves the generosity of God, the bigger and the more confident their prayers become. And I believe that as a church, this is a time where we need to be praying big, confident, bold prayers to God. Thirdly, when we believe that God is a generous God, then our generosity increases. The key to becoming generous people, and not just Giving Sunday, but generous in absolutely every area of your life, the key is to see yourself as rich. The richer you are, the more you give. Now, I am not talking about financial riches. We are in all sorts of different situations within this room. And Paul certainly wasn't a rich person. He went through periods of extreme poverty in which he went without food. And yet, he saw himself as rich. And he even considered the Corinthian church who he was writing to as rich, which is amazing considering some of them were actually slaves. But he writes this, "You have been made rich in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion." Now, what's Paul talking about here? Well, earlier in the letter, Paul wrote about Jesus. He said, though Jesus was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that through his poverty you might become rich. Jesus left the riches of heaven to be born into poverty, to live as a homeless person, to die as a criminal. And yet, through his poverty, we become rich. Through his coming down, we are lifted up. And through Jesus' poverty, you get to live a life of abundance, abundant forgiveness, abundant grace, abundant purpose, abundant joy, and abundant hope. And Paul finishes this section in verse 15 by saying this, "Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift." Imagine receiving a gift that is so off the chart generous that you are lost for words when you begin to describe it. And you can't, because it's an indescribable gift. Well, this indescribable gift that Paul writes about is Jesus. And the more you comprehend Jesus as the indescribable gift of your life, the more that true sacrificial generosity will flow out of you in every area of your life. If you think of yourself as poor, you'll struggle to give, and it will come as a kind of guilt-ridden thing. But If you truly believe that through Jesus you have been made rich in every way, then something will shift in your heart around generosity to other people.